is up, everybody? So, a little bit of technical difficulties today. Things are running a bit slower down here where I'm based right now. So, I apologize if for any reason the stream kind of like skips or anything like that. Seems to be nice and stable now. I had to change a couple things in OBS to get it to not be dropping frames left and right. So, we'll kind of roll with it and see how it goes. Um, Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. After the success we've had the last couple of streams with, kind of really tailoring a lot of these conversations into the back and forth between all of you watching and some of the things that I have prepared to show you guys, we wanted to continue that trend. So I figured, looking at a lot of the conversations that have been going around on the different Facebook groups and different platforms, there's a lot of kind of lesser known features that I have seen getting brought up a lot in some different groups. So from photography options that you can do with the camera to some of the video functionality, and then kind of once light is kind of brought to some of those features, well, how do they work? What do you actually do with them? And I wanted to actually circle back to a little bit of a thing that I was going to talk about last week, but we ran out of some time. And that's looking at just a quick example of B-Raw footage from the S1H in Premiere Pro. Since I know a lot of people that are going to be working with B-Raw are actually going to be working in DaVinci Resolve, which is still the preferred platform to work with it in. But there's still capabilities that you have in Premiere Pro that make it, pretty useful to work with there if you are a Premiere editor like I typically lean to be. We'll also look at a little bit of side-by-side as to what options are available in the current builds of Premiere between B-Raw as well as Prores Raw. So I have a Prores Raw clip from the S1 in 5.9K. So as you guys probably have noticed, we released that firmware. I see a couple of people are shouting out in the chat about it. And I'm just going to knock one thing completely out of the conversation right now. I see a lot of people asking questions about this mythical GH camera. We have no information that we can talk about on this stream, and anyone in the chat that's commenting about anything about it, it's all speculation. There's no information that we have or anything about it. So I just want to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page with that. Outside of this, if you're new to the Lumix live streams, and I apologize if I'm a little slow today, if you're new to the Lumix live streams, these are our weekly events that we do where we have conversations back and forth with all of you in the chat and answer questions that you have, as well as also from time to time bring in guests to talk, from professional photographers to videographers to some of my coworkers here like Matt Frazier, to go into like ultra deep dive tech conversations with equipment, and just offer a platform for everyone to communicate with each other, share ideas, help troubleshoot with each other, but then also get answers from the source instead of having to wade through all of the kind of mess that is the internet of misinformation. So with that, we're going to get started in a second, but I want to remind everybody that we have both the Lumix Pro Services Red platform and the Platinum tier programs that are available for Lumix users in different regions. In the United States, it's lumix-pro.us, or you can take a look at that QR code there to go take a look at the platform. The Red tier is free. This is what's going to get you your 3-year warranty. It's going to get you tracking for turnaround times. It's going to have a portal specifically for the Lumix products. And then there's the Platinum tier, which is the, I'd say, more involved tier. This is for users that really put your equipment through the paces, where downtime is not an option for you. So you get a lot of benefits with the Platinum series, like an included welcome grip, which is a Peak Design strap. It's a collaborative strap that we have with them for signing up and getting into the program. You get 20% off at a warranty repair. So if you drop it, things like that wouldn't be covered under manufacturer defect or warranty, things like that. You still get that 3-year warranty service. You get a hotline directly in with our team, so you have faster troubleshooting when it comes to things that may be going wrong in the field. And you also have the sensor cleaning, lens calibration, and firmware updates available to you in the Platinum tier. So take a few minutes at some point, go take a look at them. I highly recommend everybody, if you even own Lumix cameras, take a look at least the red tier. It's just there's nothing really about it other than getting yourself registered, making sure you have the cameras in there that qualify for it, and get yourself into that program. So let us, where do I want to start? I think I'm going to start actually with probably, it shows you how scattered my brain is today. If you have questions for me during this stream, tag at Lumix Cameras before your question. That'll pop up on my screen. I'll be able to see it and get you guys answers as we go through the presentation, through the broadcast today. And I'll do my best to get you guys some answers. Basically, from here on out, it's probably just going to be me monitoring the chat for the time being right now. Jack's got some other stuff going on with his responsibilities for the company, so I don't know if he's going to be joining us in chat. If he does, it's going to be kind of sporadic. So it's really important to make sure you tag at Lumix Camera so I can see those questions. All right. So I think one of the first things that I want to kind of talk about is actually a post that came up on some of the Facebook groups actually about, from a photography standpoint, and I know a lot of everyone here is videography based, and just bear with me. From a photography standpoint, we have Lumix Tether, we have the ability to control and send photos over a wired USB connection to a computer, to a storage device, wherever you want to send them. For studio shooting or kind of client work where, you want to have a base station to have all your stuff sent to so you can do editing on the fly, stuff like that. Well, one of the kind of features that doesn't really get talked about much with the Lumix cameras is that you do also have a wireless capability to do this as well, though not as necessarily integrated as something like Lumix Tether. So with cameras that have our Wi-Fi functionality built into it, when you go into the Wi-Fi settings, which actually, let me turn my S5 on here. All right. And cool. I actually set that. I remembered to set this up right. So we're looking at my S5 here right now, and one of the cool things that you have with the camera is that there's the ability to connect in with Wi-Fi and have it send up to not just a mobile device, but to a couple of different platforms. So the easiest way you go about getting into this is if you have your touch tab enabled, you tap that FN button, you tap on FN3 in this case, which is the little Wi-Fi icons, which is going to get you set up so that you see the Wi-Fi menu. And by default, you're presented with this screen. Actually, let me move my camera. There we go. This is the screen that you're initially presented with. And this is how, if you've connected in with your mobile device or a tablet, this is how you would normally do it. But what we're going to do is actually press the display button, and we're going to go into the more kind of customizable wireless functionality setup. Now, this is where you can go in, click on New Connection, and then I'm going to go to Send Images While Recording. Now, this also works for your mobile device as well, so you can have these linked together and just always have copies of your JPEGs and RAWs being sent over into your mobile device and not have to worry about it as backup storage, especially if you're traveling. It's a pretty nice thing to work with. And this does this through the Wi-Fi connection. So I'm going to click on Send Images While Recording, and you'll see that you have a couple of different options here. And some of these are only going to be available in certain regions across the globe. Like in the United States, we have smartphone and PC. I haven't worked with Cloud Sync service here or tried it, and I haven't tried web service before. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the PC option. So we're just going to click on PC. Now, because I'm here working in my home office, I have my wireless network, and it would be the same as if I was out on a shoot and we're working in a studio and there's wireless in the studio. So there's internet connection in the studio. So I'm going to select here and go via network. And this is going to search my home for my network. Now, since I've connected this camera before to my home internet, you're going to see that it's automatically going to connect. So this is pretty cool when you already have it set up. Let's see here. There's a question in here from Keith. You'll be talking about the FZ2500 later. B&H says AG-CX350 also has a 1-inch sensor, 8.8 to 176mm zoom. Are they the same actual sensor and lens? I will be talking about the FZ2500 a little bit later. I couldn't get the exact demo finished in time that I wanted to show, the Dolly Zoom, but I can show you in the menu. But yeah, the FZ2500 is very similar to some of our camcorder options. I believe it's actually closer to the X1 from our camcorder, which I think is also very similar to the CX350. It's just a matter of some of the inputs and or outputs that you have on the cameras. So it's going to be pretty similar between the two. Let's see here. We have another question. Lumix Sync was crashing last update on Android, but reinstalling it did fix it. Okay, I think that's just a comment. If there's a question there and I'm just being thick, just let me know. But yeah, it's one of the important things about making sure your apps are always updated. Phone OSs always change and update, and it kind of can screw up some things here. Why Lumix Tether works only with USB connection? Why can't it work with Wi-Fi? Will it someday? So this is actually one of the things that we're looking at right now. So let me go back to my main camera. So as far as Lumix Sync goes, the mobile software, that is designed around mobile OS, so it's designed to work in a very specific way over Wi-Fi with the controls that are capable over Wi-Fi. As far as Lumix Tether goes, it only operates over USB for cameras that have the compatibility to it, and you can check the link, which I'll drop in the chat in a little bit, for Lumix Tether, and I'm watching my bitrate drop, so if I skip for a second, I apologize. Because it works only with USB, it's designed specifically with that control system enabled. And that's just how it works. Wi-Fi, you run into a couple of different problems with Wi-Fi that I've always seen as far as stability, because you're usually working in some environments where you may not be near an access point. So wireless controlling with all of that UI, as well as the actual live view of it, can be a little challenging. So for the time being right now, it just works as just as wired. And again, everybody, I apologize if this stream is kind of skipping a little bit. All of a sudden, my bit rates are jumping all over the place. Thank you, internet service provider. So, yes, let's go back to the camera here. So one of the ways to work around this for situations where you're working in a studio and you want to set your camera up so that it's sending photos as you shoot them to a storage device. In my case, I have a NAS set up on my network that I want to have my RAW and JPEGs photos sent to while I'm shooting, so that immediately I'll have the copy on the card, I have my backup already done, and I don't have to think about it anymore. It's all just ready to go. And then obviously, depending if you're using a NAS, using Capture One or Lightroom, you can look to do auto importing, stuff like that, but that's a whole nother stream there. So once you're on this setup here, what you're going to do is you're going to be presented here with manual input. Thanks for the update, Marco. I appreciate that. So you're going to click on manual input. And one of the things that you're going to see here is that it's just a blank field. It's kind of, what do you want to connect to? And this is going to vary depending on how your network setup is, whether or not you want to send it directly to a computer on your network. I did a quick video last year about connecting into an actual PC, so a Windows PC, which is a little more complicated because of the way Windows OS works now, where it's always tied in with a Microsoft account and stuff like that. You have to create a local account to be able to link into it, but the principle is going to be the same here. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually punch in the IP address of my network attached storage. So I'm actually going to disconnect this here because I don't want you all seeing my IP address. Going to unplug the HDMI, and I'm going to punch this in here. And then I'm going to show you guys the next screen. So as a reminder, if you guys have questions, doesn't even have to be about this topic, just drop them in the chat and I will get to them while I'm putting this in. So for this particular thing here, it's a little labor intensive the first time you set it up, but once you do this the first time, it automatically gets saved into your past connections. So you're able to just go in there, the same setting, and then just do connect from previous connection. So let's see here. Let's punch in the IP address of my. Let's punch in the network address of my NAS. Okay. So now that I have the IP address added in, you'll see now that I'm presented here with a username and password enter. So this is the basic. This is the login credentials that you're going to use for your particular setup. In this case, on my NAS, it's a TNAS, so nothing special. Synology, all those companies, it's going to be pretty much the same. What I'll do here is just punch in the login credentials that I use for my admin control, and then that brings me into the next step. So we're going to disconnect again, come back to this, and let's see what questions we got here. I don't know if this is the stream for it, but the S1 can't automatically enable APS-C mode with MC21 and Sigma DC lenses. For some reason, bottom right of the picture is black, top and C4K internal. Okay, so specifically for that, way back when we launched the system and the MC21 adapter was getting out into the public, there were firmware updates that needed to be done. So with your adapter, make sure the adapter is up to date on firmware. You'd go to Sigma Photos US site or Sigma Photos website for that. And then just ensure that your lenses are updated as well. Once you do that, it will correct that little black bar thing that was going up. It was a miscommunication in firmware, I believe. So once you have them updated, you should be good to go. So let's see here. Let me punch in my credentials for this camera, and then we'll get into actually how this works. As a reminder, if you guys have questions, drop them in the chat just like you've seen here before, and I'll get to them. I apologize, I know this part's a little boring. Almost there. It's always important, like it's always nice to have a really good kind of hard to get password, but then like when you go to punch it in, it's like it's a little tedious. But security is so much better. All right, it would help if I entered it in right, wouldn't it? So let's back this up here. Let's see here. Why this upload thing only uploads images, not even raw, if I remember correctly. No. The part that I'm going to show you actually will do raw files as well, and I'll show you how to set it up. MC21 is latest firmware, still have the problem. Then it's going to be on your lenses. You have to make sure that your lens firmware update is current as well. I imagine you're probably using the 18 to 35. It's kind of one of the most common ubiquitous lenses in the market for a lot of people adapting. Yeah, so you're gonna have to make sure you have that updated. Is the connection to PC only for S5 or other Lumix cameras? What protocol is used for the transfer? FTP, NFS, or something else? I believe it's FTP. Let me get this in here. This went so much faster in my prep. There we go. Okay. Now that I actually like took a second and looked at it. That would be a lens cap. Let's hear. We'll upload thing on S once the video is in the future? I think you're asking, will this work for video in the future? I'm not sure. I have asked if it's something that's possible. I'm not sure what the setup is there. Keith says, is this a connection? Oh, yeah, I read that one already. And the 18 to 35, yes, that make sure your lens is up to date as well. There's probably a firmware update specifically for your lens. And that should fix it. As long as the firmware update in the adapter and the lens are on the most current version, you'll be fine. So now we've got the information plugged in here, and you'll see now it's asking me to select the folder I want to send these photos to. So I have public, app data, admin. It's kind of just the basic file structure that shows up on my NAS. In this case, I'm going to be sending all of my files to public, just because that's the folder I have here. And this is where you get the option to say, do you want to send JPEG? Do you want to send RAW? Do you want to send lower resolution? If you have geolocation on, do you want to have it strip the location data out of it? And you do this just by pressing the display button. And under size, you can say original, or I can go in and change it. Like if I want large, medium, small, VGA. In this case, I'm going to go back and I want to send the original files. And then under file format, I can select JPEG, RAW plus JPEG, or just RAW. So in this case, we're just going to do RAW plus JPEG. Once I have that set, just click the back button again, confirm that all your settings are there. So original size, RAW plus JPEG, and then I want to, in this case, I'm not using the location data on this camera. So then I just click set. Now you'll see that we're back into the shooting mode here. So this is a pretty straightforward, setup. Aside from the password and user input, that works much faster when you're not also doing two things at once. So now that we have that set up, we're going to be taking a look at, so we have the camera angle, which is going to show me the shooting scenario, which I'm going to show you from this angle, just so you guys see, like, hey, I'm actually taking these pictures. So I'll unplug this, go in here, and you'll see I'm going to take a couple of pictures. But before I do that, I'm going to be looking at my MacBook here. So I have my MacBook set up, and I have a folder on my NAS here, which shows 2021-04-08. So that is the actual folder that gets created. So now as I take a picture, take a couple of pictures, you see those photos now populating into that. My NAS is spinning up and it's working. And right now you'll see on the top of the camera, if I go back to this, you'll see the blue light is flashing, which tells you that you're sending data out and it's going over into the computer. So then in a second or so, if I go in here, take a look back here, go to my folder again, we'll see that those photos are going to start showing up in a second. And my internet is starting to dump out again. So I'm wondering if my NAS is what's partially causing some of those issues. Okay. So as you'll see, they're starting to populate there. The transfer rate that you get when you do it this way is typically going to be, from what I've measured, somewhere between 3 to 5 megs per second if you've got a good, strong connection and you're not congesting your network across the board. Downloading and sending up this kind of video footage is going to hamper that a little bit because of the fact that, everything's running through one switch. It's a gigabit switch. So you run into a little bit of overhead there. But this allows me to just constantly have these images over, ready to go, so that by the time I'm done shooting, I can then take my Lightroom catalog or my Capture One catalog and just start working on those photos and actually edit them, get them ready to go. So, let's see here. Yeah, so you see we got a couple of them there now. And the last one just went over because I only sent over RAW because I'm only shooting RAW in the camera. So, what was the other question I just saw there? Also this topic, I couldn't connect phone to hotspot when it was on 5G mode, but I can connect to the routers on 5G network, Samsung S10e. That could be because of the way the Samsung phones handle their wireless connections to certain devices. I use an S21 5G, and I noticed when I changed over to this, there's a couple extra little things you have to make sure. And most of the time, like if I'm connecting here in my apartment because I want to send photos over, I just connect to the standard connection that comes over, and then it auto identifies as whether it's a 5G or 2.4G. You're not really going to see too much of an issue there. What you may be running into with the 5G mode is that there may be too much congestion in the area, which is why you're not able to get the camera to connect to it. It also depends on what the strength of the actual wireless cards are in the different devices. There's a lot involved with it and a lot of kind of interspersed issues. In this particular apartment, if I try 5G connecting or if I use Wi-Fi 6 on like my desktop, which has it, my router, which is capable of it, I can run into some other issues because there's a couple other people in the area that work on the same bands. So that goes into a whole nother troubleshooting thing of making sure your wireless connections are free of interference from other locations. MV is asking, what SSD should be used to shoot RAW? If you can clarify what you're specifically looking for, are you talking like on the Ninja 5? Are you talking with the S1H and BRAW for SSD control? If you give me a little more information, I can maybe point you in the right direction. FC is saying, if Wi-Fi transfer is set to small images, can the image be an original resolution to the internal storage? Yep. That's the kind of the part about this that's actually really, really useful. If all you're using the wireless transfer function is to just get a lower resolution image off the camera onto your computer so you can have a good preview of that image, you just go into, instead of sending original, you click on change and you just select a smaller resolution, and that will just send the smaller file over. And typically at that point, you're only going to send JPEGs anyway, because usually it's just a reference. But yeah, you can send out smaller JPEGs out that way, and all your files will always be recorded to the card. It dumps them to the card first and then activates the process of sending them over Wi-Fi to your external device. So let's see. That's kind of that one that we looked at. Let's see what other questions we have in here. So that was that one. Downloaded the update for the S1, but haven't been able to get those features. Maxwell, you with the S1 update, if you're looking at trying to get the RAW over HDMI, a lot of the features that were kind of like headline on that firmware, it is part of the SFU2 upgrade for the camera. So if you don't see any of them, you would need to acquire the SFU2 upgrade to get the camera to have all of those features, because it's part of that package. So, Maxwell, you might want to address Lumix cameras and say which features are. Yeah, so like, let me know which features you're not seeing on the camera, because usually it's just that you have to have the SFU2 upgrade. Okay. The next, one of the next kind of features that I wanted to talk about, because I got a lot of people asking me questions about this on some of the forums, was hearing this thing called focus transition on the GH series. What it is, how it works, what's the purpose of it. So what I have over here on my side here is I have my GH5 set up. So we've got the camera, nothing special. We're just looking at my flash and my G100, my, I think it's my FZ2500, and then I have some anamorphic lenses on the shelf back here. So with focus transition, one of the things that a lot of people like to be able to do is pre-planned focus pulls on your camera. So being able to rack focus from one distance to another, have it be repeatable, and have it as a one-button operation. So that just means you can click one button on the camera, and it will run this focus transition. And this brings up a kind of good point. So JDP's asking, we going to get focus transition on the S series? It is on the S series. It's on the S1H. It's a very specific video functionality, so that's why it's in the S1H. So if it's something that you desperately need, that's pretty much the camera that you'd probably want to go with for that kind of things. Obviously, because of all the other functionalities as well, unlimited recording, stuff like that. So for the time being, and as far as I know, the S1H is the only S series camera that has it. But when you look at the G series, which is the one that we're looking at right now, again, just like I said, the S1H has focus transition. So the cinema camera, which would be the S series idea of like what the GH line is for Micro Four Thirds, top tier, very very video centric. The others are more hybrid centric. So with this particular setup here, you're going to be able to do focus transition by just going into the menu, and you'll see it's going to be under the main camera menu. So you're going to want to be in the video function mode. So this is creative video. And then you'll go into the option called focus transition. Now what this will let you do is go in and focus pulse settings, which lets you basically set up what are the points that I want to have predetermined in this system so that I can push a button and have it rack to that focus point. So in this case, I'm going to set focus point 1, and I'm going to make this my Godox flash that I have here. So I'm doing this by eye looking at my computer screen. So we got this, push the menu set button. I want to go to position 2, which I'm going to make my G100 back there. We're going to push menu set again. And then we're going to go to position 3, and I'm going to set this out on the anamorphic lenses in the back. About as close as my eye can tell me that I'm in focus here. And the peaking's active on the camera. So now that I have those three points set, I know where those different 3 points are. I can go back, and then I can change the different transition speeds for this. So you have SL, which is like super long. So this is going to be really at a snail's pace, moving from near to far or far to near. You have low or long, which is going to be a little bit faster, medium, H, and then SH, which is going to be super fast. Near, basically like a jump to go one to the other. Is S1 can S1H do focus pull with MC21, or is it only with L-mount lenses? I'm gonna have to double check on that. I think it's only with the Lumix lenses, mainly because of the fact that the motors required for the precision. I know that 100% we use, obviously, the types of motors that are needed to do this. I think there's maybe a little too much variance in some others, so it's not sure how they would work to be able to step in the right speeds. That's why if you put a older style converted lens onto the camera, you'll actually hear the focus motor because they were designed for the original decoupled phase detect systems. So they're loud, they're slow, they're clunky compared to modern lenses that are more sophisticated in their design. Could you explain the differences between the S1H and the S1 My Menu functionality? It seems the S1H can do way more. Yes, it actually can do a lot more. My Menu functionality is that basically where you can just set it up so that the camera will remember and basically file out certain menu settings that you use often that you want to program in. Because the S1H has a lot more functionality and has a lot more capabilities, you have a lot more that can be put in there. The S1, even after the upgrade, still has a ton of functionality, but there's little differences just because of what's available on the cameras. So certain things are only going to be found on the S1H, certain things are found carried over into the S1s where it's possible. And ultimately, a lot of that's just down to making sure that everything that's put into the camera is a reliably functioning addition, that it's not going to be something where you throw it in there and it just up and shuts off. That's one of the worst things that could happen, or it affects something else in the camera and degrades quality in a different area. The cameras are designed to be basically as hard pushed as they possibly can without breaking them. So, which SSD can you use for ProRes Raw? So as far as ProRes Raw goes with the Ninja 5, I encourage you to go take a look at the Atomos website. Under the support tab, they have an entire list of SSDs that they've tested to give you kind of confirmation and at least a direction to look into as far as the compatible drives go. That's probably the best place to start. I'm someone who recommends pretty heavily, like if you have a list there of SSDs that are tested and they have ratings for like which modes work best and which ones are not really supported with it, go by those ratings to determine whether or not you want to buy an SSD. Because if you end up getting an SSD that's outside of that list and then have problems with it, it makes the troubleshooting just a nightmare to figure out, is it the SSD? Is it a firmware thing? Is it an HDMI cable? Is it power delivery? Is it a firmware problem? All those kinds of things. For my S1, I don't even know where I put it anymore. I use the SanDisk Ultra that's listed on their site, the 512 gig one. But truthfully, it's like I don't record long form with ProRes or B-Raw for that matter. A lot of it's making sure that I can test things that you guys ask us to test to see if things work. Something to note is that you may notice that the 512 gig version of say, the Western Digital Blue is approved, or theoretical. I think actually I don't know if the Western Digitals are technically approved, but you may find that someone says that the 2 terabyte, like we're seeing in here, the 2 terabyte Blue works, but then the 1 terabyte doesn't work, or the 512 works and the 1 terabyte fails and the 2 terabyte fails. A lot of this stuff kind of goes around into looking at what type of technology is used in the memory on the SSD, whether it's MLC, TLC, QLC, whatever the technology is with it. That can be the difference between, within the same product stack, a higher capacity just not wanting to work if it uses a different type of technology. So, yeah, take a look at those sites, the Atomos site, and it'll tell you whether or not it pretty much can work. And they have that list of what works, what's quote-unquote rated to work for ProRes Raw up to 6K. Basil's asking, does the latest firmware allow me to assign whatever ISO value I want for the dual ISO function in both stills and video? So what the dual native ISO update portion is for the S1 is that you now have the ability to go in and just say the low gain circuit or the high gain circuit. So low range and high range. Know that if you're shooting in Vlog, it's going to be 640 in the low range, 4000 in the high range, and you'll see that when you change them in, that the lowest one that you can go to is 640 in low and 4000 in high. You can enable the expanded or extended ISO range, which I wouldn't really use in the low range, but if you're someone who's got a setup shot and you're looking and it's saying that it actually you should be shooting at like 2000 ISO, you can... Ideally, you'd go up to the 4000 ISO circuit and then adjust lighting if you can, but if you can't adjust lighting, go into the high range circuit, turn on extended ISO, and then lower your ISO down to 2000 instead of bringing it up to 2000 in the low range. You'll give up a little bit of highlight dynamic range because you're going below the native ISO. So it's very common in how dual native ISO systems work and how ISO works in general. So you give up a little bit of highlight details and that, like the dynamic range that you'd see, but you'll get a cleaner image than doing 2000 ISO from the low circuit. So hopefully that's a little tip there for you. On Atomos website, C4K is not listed as ProRes resolution, only UHD on S1. Can you explain this? S1 is C4K. You pretty much can use those, the ratings synonymous. There's a slight difference obviously in the framing between C4K and UHD. It's 4096 by 2160 versus 3840 by 2160. So if it works for UHD, it's probably going to work for C4K. A lot of times things just have to be as simple as possible on a website so that you can get as many people to understand what the ratings are. But yeah, so C4K not listed on the ProRes resolutions, only UHD. That should be there. C4K is 422 10-bit on all frames. I can't find definitive answer on that. C4K, it'll change up a little bit. I have a graphic that at the end, I'll see if I can find it. I have to remember if I updated it. But if you take a look at a couple weeks ago, Matt Frazier and I did the S-Series update video. That has an entire walkthrough of what is available, what's actually going to work on the cameras, what the bitrate is, what the bit depth is. The only issue on that was that, which someone in the chat corrected it for me, that in the slide that I had up, I had mistyped H.264 instead of H.265 in some places. But the bit depth and chroma subsampling are correct on that. So take a look at the S-Series firmware update, Lumix Live, that we did a couple of weeks ago. That has all that info. So back to the GH5 here. So we have a couple of these different speeds here. For this demo, I'm just going to use the super fast transition. And then you have a couple of other options here. You have focus transition on record. So that's when you click record. Is it going to be on 1, 2, or 3? And then you also have wait, which is how long you want it to wait before it goes to the next section. Oh, you mean HDMI out. C4K would be, well, it would be an uncompressed HDMI out. So if you're in ProRes LT, ProRes HQ, if you're in RAW, the 422 doesn't matter because it's not part of it. It's a raw signal. So it's going to depend on what you're actually going out to. Joyce is asking, when you talk about high resolution, can you talk about the actual pixels? Are they smaller pixels or same size? Post-processing implications? So I assume you're mentioning higher resolution over 4K. So like the new 5.9K that's available in RAW over HDMI. The difference there is that RAW is typically always going, or to be proper RAW, or to be as close to a total RAW file as you can get for video, you want to record the actual pixels. You don't want binning or skipping or any of that stuff processing done to the image, which reduces image quality and can be seen in a number of pieces of footage from ProRes Raw that's out there outside of our cameras. So what that means is that you have the 4096, or it's a little bit different than 4096 because it's the actual raw frame rates. And I'm going to pull it up on my S1 here so I give you guys the correct answer and the correct resolutions for it. So as an example, high resolution here on 5.9K from the S1 is going to be, and this is raw over HDMI, this is 5888 by 3312, which is going to give you that 16:9 aspect ratio, so it's going to give you the same 16:9 that you're used to shooting in. And that's going to be the full sensor width of the S1's sensor. And that's what gives you up to 30p, so you have 24 and 30p. Then you go to Cinema 4K, which is 17:9 aspect ratio, with ProRes Raw, or Raw over HDMI in this case, and that's going to be read out at 4128 by 2176. Now that's because that is the actual pixels that you're getting for the resolution. So that's also why you're shooting the 4K Raw over HDMI in this camera. So say if I do 30p on this, and I take a look at the camera, which I can't really demonstrate this on the screen, but I can explain it. So that's why when you look at the 4K resolution that you're getting out of it, you're going to see a little bit tighter of an image than you do on the 5.9K because it's actually recording the proper pixels for it. Not a crazy difference because the sensor is 24 megapixel, but that's one of the things that you're going to see there. One of the other questions here was, not sure if it's been asked before, but when shooting Vlog L in the BGH1 in low light dark areas, there seems to be noise lines not showing on natural CV. Is this normal or concern? Most likely you're probably so underexposed where you're seeing any kind of artifact or anything like that in the shadows, you would want to start with, make sure that vlog's being exposed properly. In low light scenarios, log may not be the best option for you if you're shooting in an environment where you don't have control over the lighting. Let me go back to my main camera. It's a little bit easier instead of just staring at the blue background. Uh, with log profiles, you don't necessarily always want to be shooting log. It's great if you have the full capability to control lighting, or if you've got decent natural lighting so that everything can work. It's great. With the Vlog and Vlog L, when you go into really dark scenarios and you really, really are losing a lot of your shadow information, and by that I mean like you're pushing 5 to 8 stops underexposed from 42 IRE, that's a lot of information to bring up in the shadows. So you want to really try to make sure that you're bringing the exposure up as much as you can, while protecting your highlights, making sure your midtones are somewhere around 42 IRE, which is the ideal spot for the gray point, skin tones, some skin tones. So you want to try to make sure that you're there as much as you can. And then on some cameras that have the luminance spot meter, that'll let you actually go into the shadow and see how far underexposed that shadow is. But then also go to your highlights and see how much headroom you have to bring your exposure up, or do the ETTR, so exposed to the right, so that you're not having to pull shadow information up. That's probably what's going to help with your shot on the BGH1. The other thing too is that Natural and Cine D are a 709 profile, and they have different noise reduction algorithms between all the different platforms. So that's where some of that's coming from. Can we output ProRes 422 or Full HD? I'm new to this and just want to know. And RAW can only be 5.9, 4K, 3.5K, not Full HD. Correct. Because RAW is the actual pixel data, and the actual, like, we're not doing binning or skipping to get larger or smaller field, frame views. It is 5.9K, 4K, or 3.5K anamorphic. So there is no 1080 RAW over HDMI. Let me finish this part real quick, and then we're gonna jump over, because I want to make sure that I talk about the FZ2500 too. So keep the questions going. Once I get through this last part, then I'll go back and we'll run a little long with the other questions as well. So as far as this goes here, I'm going to turn this off, but what focus transition now gives us, as a recap, I've got 3 focus points selected. I've got my transition speed set to SH. I'm turning off the other 2 options for this demo, and then all I'm going to do is press start. What you're going to see on the bottom here is that I've got 3 positions programmed in for this particular camera. And that means that I can go in and I can tap, in this case, position 1, and it focuses right onto the Godox flash. I can tap position 3, and it immediately goes back and focuses on the box. Tap position 2, go to the other Lumix cameras, and I can jump around with these as much as I want, and it'll always go back to the same exact point. So this becomes incredibly useful for those certain shots, like say you're a wedding photographer and you've got, or a wedding videographer, and you've got, kind of the setup time, you're waiting for the reception to start, that kind of thing, and you've got kind of the nice setup of like the rings or the cake or anything like that, and you want to be able to do a nice cinematic pull with it, but you don't have a focus puller. You'd be able to set up the focus transition in a camera like the GH5 or GH5S, or go up into the S1H, and you'd be able to program in your focus transitions there and be able to do it a couple of times and know that it's 100% the same points where it's supposed to be. Let's see here. Enrique, hearing a lot about global shutter in the market lately. What about Lumix? Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about global shutters too, but not that anyone's actually putting them in cameras, other than a couple cinema cameras that have them, and you take a dynamic range hit in those cameras. Yeah, otherwise, I've heard of global shutters before. A lot of other cameras have global shutters as well. When you say 422, the signal is luminance and chroma data. When you say RAW, they're RGB Bayer pattern, if I understand this correctly. It depends on which RAW you're sending out. That's more detail specifically. Like I would check with Atomos for ProRes RAW or Blackmagic for B RAW for some of that info. Because there are differences in the way that RAW is processed when you look at B RAW versus ProRes RAW. There are some differences there. Uh, ultimately, which actually this is a good segue. I'm just gonna show you. I'm gonna go to this screen actually. So since we're talking about B-RAW and ProRes RAW, and I promise I am going to get to the FZ2500 next, um, B-RAW and ProRes RAW are both a RAW format that you can work with, that you can plug into your particular program of choice. Now, one of the big takeaways here, I'd say for a lot of people, is that B-RAW is going to function very streamlined in DaVinci Resolve. So it's a Blackmagic product. It's going to work really well in DaVinci Resolve. You're going to have the control you need, and it's usually going to be the most integrated there. ProRes RAW is kind of the same thing, but with Final Cut Pro. You're going to have way more actual control in something like Final Cut with ProRes RAW than you will currently today in Premiere Pro. And then obviously for those that work in DaVinci Resolve, you know that you just don't have access to it right now. You have to transcode it. So there's differences there which can really determine which one you want to work with, which one works better for your workflow. Because I pretty much stick to using Premiere Pro, mainly because I'm not doing the same level of video editing that most of you guys are doing in the chat. I have the ability to just kind of play around in the different programs and see which one actually, you know, I kind of prefer better. And truthfully, I kind of just always prefer working in, particularly in Premiere Pro. But one of the things that you'll see is that, so if I throw this first clip here of my S5, this is ProRes RAW from the S1 in 5.9K. So if I open this and I go into the effect control, you'll see that obviously I have the ProRes RAW source settings. I can change my exposure, so I can, it's a control here, or set that back to 0. And then I have the color space selection here. So the important thing with ProRes RAW in Premiere Pro, and if you've had any conversations with me in the Facebook groups or with some of the others in the Facebook groups, there's a couple things that you truly want to make sure you have set up for ProRes RAW if you're working in Premiere. Make sure you're running the most current version of the ProRes RAW codec from Apple for Windows. If you're not running that, you can run into all kinds of issues with the footage just looking like garbage because it doesn't know what to do with it. Or if you're running that original one, because whenever all this stuff first started, we, you know, kind of everyone was like, hey, let's go jump on the beta, and then never updated it again because it doesn't prompt you to update it. It'll work, but you'll have really weird shifts in the image appearance. So make sure you're running the most current version of that. Just go to the Apple site and you can download that. Then when it comes to actually working in Premiere, you'll see that, like, if I look at this footage right here, it doesn't look like log footage. It looks closer to 709. Like, there's something just not 100% right about it. So I'm going to go into my effect control, and you're going to go into color space and select Vlog V-Gamut. So now when I go back to it, and I open this up, see if it wants to cooperate with me. Now you'll see it looks much, much, much closer to log footage. The last step you have to do with the ProRes RAW footage when you're working in Premiere, and this is the same for Final Cut as well, is you're going to have to put on a basic correction LUT here, which is going to bring this, which is the Vlog RAW gamut to Vlog V gamut. And you just need to apply that so that it kind of brings the colors back to what you'd expect they should be for a vlog workflow. This is the point where I'm also going to point out that obviously this is the one that we provide that fits in with our workflow, with the vlog workflow. So if you've got a Vericam, if you've got an Evil One, this is going to help you keep all of the cameras within the same kind of workflow. There are some very talented filmmakers and editors out there that have created their own LUTs too. Unfortunately, I don't call out specific for any of them because there are so many of them that also have some correction LUTs. So this is one of the things where checking with the community that's here, that's on the Facebook groups, that's here in chat with us, they can help you guide through it. If you're new to working with ProRes Raw or B-Raw, there's a lot of people that have experience with these things and can offer you guys some tips as well. Not to put people on the spot, but that's one of the cool things with the community that we have. Everyone's always pretty cool in providing some tips for each other. So you see here with ProRes Raw, those are my settings I have. I have my exposure slider, and I have the ability to fix the color space to put it into Vlog vGamut. And then I can start working with the file, and I can grade it and start working with it the way I would want to. But now if I look at this shot from B-Raw, so this is a 3:1 compression. This is from the S1H shot into my Ninja, or not my Ninja, my Video Assist 7-inch that Blackmagic sent me so that I can make sure that everything's working for you guys. And then I can also troubleshoot. But one of the things you'll notice here is that if I go to Effect Control, there's a lot more options in here. But currently, camera metadata selected, so it's going to use the, what the camera was shot at to actually work with the image. But if I go in here and I change clip, you'll see that you have the different color science processing. You have the Vlog vGamut selected already. So these are in independent testing that proves that this is the best option for the camera. Gives you the best dynamic range, gives you the best overall performance. But I also still only have an exposure slider here to adjust the image. So you have a little bit of limitation when it comes to the current deployment in things like Premiere Pro. But ultimately, as long as you nail your white balance, which I do with either a gray card or I have one of the, I think it's the old Expo Disc things, to let me do white balance custom settings on the cameras. Once you have that stuff set up, you're pretty good to go to where your exposure slider is doing pretty much the same thing as selecting your ISO in the software. It's a matter of just how you're used to working with the cameras. In certain situations, if you know you're going to be shooting in low light, shoot in the 4000 or the high range dual native ISO circuit. If you're shooting in bright daylight, shoot in the low range and make sure you're staying at 640 or 4000 would be ideal. Use high quality ND filters if you can, and try to keep as close as you can to those numbers. That's where you're going to see probably the greatest dynamic range out of the camera. Actually, you are going to see the greatest dynamic range out of the camera versus noise profile that you would see. So one other observation that I've seen here in working with both of these files, I'm working on this particular computer that I work on is a Ryzen, so it's an AMD-based system. It's a 5600X with 32 gigs of memory, so DDR4 3600, and it is running a 3070 in here. The B-Raw footage plays really nice and simple, straightforward. I can typically scrub through without really much of an issue. It kind of just plays and I can work with it. Where if I take my ProRes, it's pretty much the same, not really much of an issue running these, and both of these are 5.9K. So as long as you have the strong enough equipment for it, you shouldn't have a problem working with either of these files when you're working in something like Premiere. Just make sure you work on your general, is the graphics card strong enough to work with it? Is your video card, or is your CPU fast enough to export it? And yeah, for the most part, everything should work fairly well for you guys. One other thing to note is that you typically don't really have to use any kind of conversion LUT on the B-Raw footage. But again, this is where I would take myself out of it because I'm not 100% sure on ultra color accuracy. That's just not what I do. Check with the community out there. There's some people that have some really cool correction LUTs for color that get it back to a really neutral standpoint if that's what you're working for ultimate color accuracy. Otherwise, I've always been a very just color grade to taste. Make sure you're within the ranges that you have to be in for the output that you're sending it to, and you should be fairly good to go. Let's see what questions we got in here, because I see a couple of them come up. The question was, need to ask for B-Raw in the S1 for future. I have no idea if B-Raw will ever come to the other cameras, but just keep asking and we'll keep pushing it up. I don't know if it's going to ever actually come to it. About white balance, why if you use custom white balance with gray cards, there's nowhere to actually see the white balance value? I have asked that before. It is recorded into the metadata. So if you use a custom white balance in video and then you go into something like media info, or now with Prores Raw or B-Raw, it does tell you what it is. I honestly don't have a good answer. I don't know why it doesn't tell us what the actual white balance is, but we can pass that up to our engineering team. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, that was on the S series. Hello, any new updates on the Lumix 35 f1.8? Unfortunately, I don't have updates on the other 1.8 lenses. Yeah, I kind of just don't have any new info other than, that we have the 85 and that the other ones were announced as coming soon. We never gave any kind of time frame on it at the time. But as soon as we have info, we would definitely be talking about it here. So this is a good point to do the plug of make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we'll have updates on all this kind of stuff. And when you subscribe, you can actually be part of the conversations with us and help mold what we do on these channels in the future. Okay. The last thing I want to take a look at here is actually with the FZ2500. As again, it shows you how off I am today. I'm just like talking away from the microphone. I ended up getting my second vaccine dose last night, so today's a little rough. Okay, so we've got, I think it's on this camera. So I've got my FZ2500 set up here. And one of the cool things that you have with the FZ2500 that's not in any of the other cameras or lenses that we have, is that I have the ability to actually program in and do Dolly Zooms on this camera. Which actually, now I'm thinking, I thought I tested this, but I might not be able to do it with this, with the HDMI cable attached. So let's see here. Come on, Dolly Zoom. I have to reset this. This was that part as to why I didn't get this one done yet, because I haven't had the chance to remind myself how to go into it. But basically, what Dolly Zoom does, if you're unaware, there's the effect where you have the camera moving in, so it's zooming in, and your subject or the camera is moving in or away from a subject, and you see the background compression shifting behind the subject without the focus changing. That's called Dolly Zoom, or the Hitchcock effect that a lot of people like to call out. So what's cool about the FZ2500 is that because of how the camera is set up, and because it takes a lot of its overall capabilities from the GH4 and the GH5, just in a super zoom camera. It allows us to be able to go in and do this stuff like a Dolly Zoom because of the way the platform's actually kind of designed. Now, I am racking my brain because for some reason, my camera is not letting me enable Dolly Zoom. And now I can't remember why. So now I look like a fool on the stream because I can't get my own camera to work. I apologize, everybody. So I'll just explain it. This was that challenge I was having with particularly getting it working on it, because it's been about a year since I worked on the camera before. So what this will do is, because of the way the FZ2500 is built, the lens system here is very similar to what you find in some of the camcorders. So what does that actually mean for any of us, right? For photographers, for videographers that want to use a camera like this. What that means is that when you want to use basically any kind of situation where you're going to be zooming while filming. So in a lot of cases, we know that that's maybe not the best thing to do with certain cameras, because either you're going to be torquing the lens, so you're going to get kind of a shift in the image, or it's going to, kind of like most point and shoot cameras, typically you'll get some kind of drift in the image where it's going to do this as it zooms through the range. The FZ2500 was designed very specifically to be able to have a centered optical path as it zooms out for more reach, so you don't get that kind of sway that you would typically see. It also has an upgraded version of the image stabilization system that's used in a lot of our point and shoot cameras, so it's much more stable as you do this. Because of those two effects, it means that you can use all of this to actually recreate the same effect that would have been typically done, where you've got a camera set up on a dolly, you've got a focus puller that's managing your focus, and you've got someone racking your zoom near to far or far to near, basically to those points. And when you do it manually, this has to be done pretty perfect, so that it actually looks right, so that as you're moving, the physical motion of the camera, the physical zoom in the camera, and the focus transition are all playing together, so that you get that effect of the background either expanding away or crowding into your subject. Because this camera has a high enough precision in the focusing system, as well as in the zooming system that's built onto this, you can do the same exact thing as a single camera operator. And it is one of the things that I'm kind of bummed that I can't get it to show live here. I'm actually very frustrated about that, because I had it working a while ago, and then it's just been a little while since I've been able to do this specifically myself. So I apologize, everyone, that I didn't get this working for you guys to see. Kind of curious as to why it is not going to let me do it. That is definitely frustrating. So I apologize about that. But yeah, the Dolly Zoom, it's a cool little feature that sets the FZ2500 apart, especially with the fact that it has the built-in ND filters. So you can go auto, 64th, 16th, or quarter for your ND filter. You have the dual ring, very much like a camcorder. So if you're someone who needs to get something that can give you the controllable reach, especially if you're using something like a mobile device that can control over Wi-Fi for this, you can control Zoom on it. You can do that. Can you share the Dolly Zoom with us next week? I 100% will show you. I will definitely get it recorded, get a sample clip, and show you guys before our session starts next week. I will also, I'll probably post something onto the Lumix USA Instagram stories and show you. Just kind of as a follow-up, since we're gonna start being a lot more active on Lumix, the Lumix USA Instagram account and the stories. So if you guys head over there, take a look at the page, like us if you don't like us already, interact with us on there. That's another place that you can interact with me for questions and stuff like that. But I will definitely get that for you. I do apologize, everybody, that I wasn't able to get that. Struggling along a little here with the with my head just being a little out of it today. Does the camera have to move in and out while dolly zooming? For the most part, yes. You can do it with someone walking towards camera or something coming towards camera. It's just a lot easier to control when you're moving the camera in and out. Because you're typically going to be on a dolly. You can actually speed ramp as you need it, so that it actually works there. Aiden Gray, I can't find white balance in metadata. It's there for Prores Raw and B-Raw. So it's in the raw files, the raw video files that have the metadata, because that's part of one of the things that you're going to use for changing exposures. Although I offlined all of my footage for this one. That was stupid of me. Maybe I have it here. Let me see if I can show you this, actually. I can. It's still on my hard drive. All right. In the meantime, we're going to go a couple of more minutes, just because I started late, and I apologize. Is there a reason for the $100 price increase on Lumix G Series in the US? There shouldn't be a price increase on anything. It's possible that you're looking at a promotion that may have just come off. So that's why there might be an increase, because a particular sales promotion went off on a product. That kind of thing happens all the time. For H.264 and H.265, there is none, only gamut. Yeah, so for H.264 and H.265 right now, I don't think that is part of what gets sent over in the metadata. I can ask with our engineers if that's something that is just either not commonly attached to it, because I'm fairly certain most other cameras too, when you're recording H.264, H.265, I don't think that is part of the metadata. That's typically used, so out of the standards. But the raw footage does give you white balance and the ISO values. So like if I pull up a Prores Raw clip here in Final Cut, so we're looking at my Final Cut here. Yeah, this will work. So I'm looking at my Final Cut here, and I'm going to go click on this file. I'm going to go into the inspector here. You'll see that the camera capture was 5500 Kelvin, and I can come in here and I can change the temperature of this. So I can go super cool, super warm, whatever I need. I can go in and I can change my aperture values, or my ISO values here. So like I can go down to 640 and then work with it there. And you also have your exposure offset slider. So one stop over, one stop under. So this gives you a couple different pieces of control based on how you're working. As far as I know, the BRAW implementation in DaVinci Resolve, in the beta version, I believe, has white balance control, but the final release doesn't yet. And I'm not sure if the ISO control, like you see here in Final Cut, where you can actually go select a value, I don't have confirmation as to whether or not it's going to look identical to that. You would want to check with Blackmagic on that in particular. Let's see here. Guide the ride. Wouldn't it be great if the camera had face recognition for security? Ironically, I'll give you guys one more tip one here, because I feel bad that I couldn't get the Dolly Zoom thing to work right. In the FZ2500, I have to remember where it is. There was, I believe, an option for doing facial recognition, where you could program in a name attached to a face. So if I go into the camera and I go to, and of course I'm going to be totally wrong. Some of our point and shoots have it, I know that. Where you can go in and actually tell it, hey, this person, you register a face in there, and then it'll prompt you and say, this is so and so, or something like that. I will have to look that up again, actually, because it's possible that the cameras no longer have that. Yeah, so I was wrong. New camera doesn't have it; the older ones do. Last question I'm going to take before I call this one for today is, I love to shoot 4K 60, but if I want 422 color, would it be possible to get 4K 60 422 8-bit instead of 422 10-bit? I don't know if I'm following. Are you saying because the subsampling is 420 10-bit on 4K 60p? I don't think you're going to get 422 8-bit in the camera. It's going to be the 420 10-bit because it's an HEVC compression, and that's the standard for HEVC. And that's what actually makes the HEVC files fairly easy to edit with. When you go outside of 420 10-bit, graphics cards typically tend to not really know efficiently how to work too well with it. If you look at what encoding and decoding the graphics cards are capable of working with, that's one of the reasons why 420 10-bit is chosen. It's also the hybrid log gamma standard. It's the HEVC delivery standard, so it's a little bit easier. If you really wanted the 422, that's where I'd say at that point, if it's that critical, the difference between 420 and 422, which for the most part, a vast majority of use cases, you're probably not going to see a huge difference between them unless you've got very specific like keying situations or hard lines. That's really where you'd see the difference. It's partially a standards thing. Outside of a case like that, that's where like you could probably just jump over and shoot the 4K 60p in ProRes, send it out there. You're gonna get much better setup there, so it should work there. The GH5 had that. Yeah, the GH5 I think had 422 10-bit 60p. But if I remember right, it was also out over HDMI only. So for that, you'd basically probably just jump over, use ProRes with a recorder, and do your 4K 60p that way. That's going to go out 10-bit, and it's going to be recorded in ProRes at that point. So it's maybe not the best solution, but it's a balance for it. Or just go out and shoot RAW, and you'll have much better performance out of it. Although, one word of caution with RAW, because I do see that people do ask this question a lot, is that when you shoot with RAW, so ProRes RAW or B-RAW, you have to balance out whether or not you want to do noise reduction on your computer or not, and you also have to look at some lens calibrations or lens corrections, because RAW data shouldn't have corrections or extra stuff put on it. Raw data is raw data, so you want to have it as close to the signal as you can. So typically you'll notice that with ProRes RAW and B-RAW, there's usually not really lens corrections put into it. So some distortion may show up. All of it is designed so that you have more of that control in your software, which can work and shift a lot of this stuff around to give you a different platform that has different strengths at running things like noise reduction or lens correction, stuff like that. And then Redbit says, I can confirm the current version of DaVinci Resolve lacks some features for B-RAW from the S1H, highlight recovery, and also it seems white balance is not perfect yet, but more tests needed. Yeah. So the last thing I would just kind of shout out to everybody is know that if you're shooting with B-RAW, it's a new format on the camera. It's a new implementation in DaVinci Resolve. Give it a little bit of time. Make sure you're getting your feedback into the companies that are involved in, their specific part of it. So camera-wise, that's us. The software, that's Blackmagic. The recorders, it's Blackmagic. And just make sure you guys are always keeping up the updating the software versions, because they're always going to be adding more stuff to it and refining it. So I meant the face recognition thing. Oh, for the GH5. Yeah, so, okay, then yeah, the GH5 has it. So, okay, with that, I'm going to stop rambling. I appreciate everyone hanging in there with me today. I know this was maybe a little more disjointed than I planned for it. It's definitely more disjointed than I wanted this to be today. I thought I had this maybe a little bit better organized, but all of you guys hanging out and chatting, getting some really good questions in there. It's awesome. That's why I love doing this stuff. Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps us out. The more interaction we get on these, the chat, the likes, the shares, all that kind of fun stuff. And make sure you guys get subscribed. We do these events every single Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Next week is actually one I'm really excited about. I'm going to be joined by Daniel Barahulik. He's one of our global ambassadors, and he's an amazing photographer. So if you guys want to listen to a seasoned photographer, just kind of have it in the background, even if you just kind of like minimize the broadcast and just listen to it like a podcast. It's going to be a really fun conversation. So we are going to be focusing probably more on photo, but we will probably address some video as well. So make sure you guys get subscribed, like the channel. Check out for that one next week. If you guys want to interact with us more, make sure to go take a look at the Instagram account. So that's Lumix USA over on Instagram. Our global channel's Lumix on Instagram. They're both the verified accounts. So interact with us there too. And as a last reminder, the Lumix Pro service, because I always want to make sure I get this in there, because I really do believe the red service is an important thing for everyone to at least go get yourself registered for if you're a pro. Make sure you guys check out the Platinum service if it's applicable to you. If you're not in the US, just go to lumix-pro.com. Check out the options available in your particular region. And then with that, again, thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you guys all next week. Hope you have a good rest of your week and weekend. Talk to you later, everybody.